Welcome to Next Radio with Broadcast Bionics, innovative solutions for creative people.
Hi there, my name's Chris Carey. I'm an economist at PRS for Music. And I'm here to talk about music, the long tail, what it means for radio. And I think it was Winston Churchill who once said, I would love to meet a one-handed economist. Someone asked why. So you can't say on the one hand this, on the other hand that. I'm unfortunately not come with any answers because I don't think it's right for me as an outsider looking in to tell you guys how to make your decisions, how to do your job. That's definitely not what I'm here for. But what I will do is run through some things that are good to know, that are helpful to know, so when you're making your decisions, you've got what you need, or a little more of what you need to make those decisions. I'm going to talk about four things. I'm going to talk about music, I'm going to talk about radio, the long tail, charts, and along the way I'm probably going to talk about ice cream, fountain pens and book tokens. I apologise, I'm the only person with lots of numbers. I've realised I'm the odd one out here, and that I've got numbers and charts, and everyone's got radio clips. But when you've worked in the music industry as an economist, you get pretty used to being the odd one out. So, what we have here, so this is a report that we wrote about a month ago that basically adds up the music industry. We've done it for about 4 years running. And I just want to give you a quick snapshot of where the music industry is at. For the first, or not surprisingly, recorded music fell last year, fell by about 8%. And that really was the result of a bad Christmas quarter. So you get music as a snapshot just now. Live music fell for the first time in a decade, which was interesting. Predominantly as a result of large stadium tours falling in volume. So Take That had been out in 2009, they're back in 2011. There wasn't anyone really filling the gap that they left in 2010, so revenues went down overall. It's certainly not a crisis in live, but it's interesting to see what happens when the big players don't perform. UK labels are diversifying. You hear a lot of armchair critics saying that labels are dead, they need to diversify. They are. That revenue's up nearly 7.2%. And that's from licensing, that's from synchronisation, that's from merchandise, from some 360 deals, there's some variety there. The point being, they are spreading out their revenue streams. UK publishing, so you'll all be familiar, records and publishing behave quite differently sometimes. And UK publishers are doing a fantastic job of exporting UK music, UK synchronisation overseas. And that's a really important facet of UK music, is that it travels very, very well. There are two net exporters of songwriting in the world, the UK and the US. It was 3 last year, but then the Swedes didn't quite keep up. And just one point on advertising, that we are seeing increased engagement and increased involvement, as well as more endorsements for artists. It's still a small number, it's about 94 million, but it's far from insignificant. So for those who like charts, which may just be me, we have a pie chart. And the point to take away here as you look at this, live is bigger than recorded, but recorded's worth £1.35 billion. So next time someone tells you there's no money in recorded music, have a word for me. Just a quick chart to show it over time. This is crazy complicated, I won't get into it. Live goes up, recorded goes down, live goes up significantly from next to nothing in 2004, about 500 mil, to well over £1 billion, £1.5 billion in 2010. And that dip you can see, 2009 and 2010, the reflection of the stadium point I made. The interesting bit, if I can draw your attention to the kind of lilac-y colour, I need to recolour this chart, so I have to refer to it as a lilac-y colour. Anyway. The lilac-y colour on top covers the on-the-night spend. So this is money that is spent inside a venue whilst you're watching music. So the beers you go for, the food you eat. That has grown tremendously as live venues do a better job of monetising consumers whilst they're in the venue. And if I manage to keep to time, we'll come back to that later. So that's a little bit on music. So let's talk about radio, and let's talk about the long tail. So radio works essentially because the audience is the product and the advertiser is the consumer. That what you're selling to someone is for an advert. And increasingly nowadays, with convergence of technology, with the availability of smartphones, you can actually sell commerce immediately. So there can be an immediate purchase in response to an advert that goes out, which wasn't true, I would argue, probably 4 or 5 years ago, because the immediacy the habit wasn't there to just hear and purchase. And so there's scope really for radio to move beyond advertising into commerce more directly. I say, one hand this, one hand that. Just leave it for you to think about. So let's talk about ice cream. If you've got a beach that's a mile long, and you've got a hut at the end of this beach selling ice creams, a competitor comes along and says, okay, where shall I set up? Customers are evenly distributed, so he could set up on the far end, look after half the beach, this guy looks after half the beach, and you'll be just fine. Everyone's happy. Except this guy thinks, well, I can corner most of the market if I go and plonk myself just next to this guy. At which point this guy responds by moving more towards the middle. He moves too. You end up in the middle. Both of you still looking after half the customers, but doing the same thing in the same place at the same time, rather than doing it in different places. I'm not saying that all radio sounds the same, but but you do tend, I didn't say it, you do tend to gravitate towards the centre. Ironically, with ice cream, vanilla is the most popular flavour. So we did some work on this. Around the time the BBC were looking at Six Music, we thought we'd provide some evidence to help inform decision making. What you've got here is just showing unique songs played over a 30-day period. So what's that, 720 hours worth of songs? Arguably, Choice ends up at the bottom with about 220 songs played over 720 hours. You can see the distinction if you look up at Six Music in that top corner that was playing more than 3,000 unique tracks over that same period. And if you look at the BBC, just to compare and contrast, given the purpose of this paper, this is published on our website, so prsmusic.com/economics. You can find this and it's all there for you. But just looking at the contrast between kind of the industry average, which is the red line, and the BBC stations, you can see how many unique songwriters were paid, which comes back to my interest at PRS, how do songwriters do out of radio? And we argue that the importance of Six, because it pays so many songwriters, shouldn't be understated. And that was our argument. Now to the long tail. The theory goes, you'll be familiar with the long tail theory? Chris Anderson's book from, 2004? Essentially says that in an internet age, demand should spread out away from a concentration of hits in the head towards a more spread demand. And so if in an old world, 80% of revenue came from your top 20% of items, in a new world, 80% of revenue should come from more than your top 20% of items. Demand should spread out as constraints are removed. So we thought we'd have a look at this and see how it works for streaming services. We looked at it for a la carte sales, so on the revenue basis, and you find actually that the majority of revenue is actually more concentrated, that the top 10% account for a good chunk of revenue, more so than they would have done historically, more so under an 80-20 rule. But giving the benefit of the doubt, you think streaming services will behave entirely differently. Purchase behaviour, you've got to take a risk to go and buy something to experiment, and it's different to streaming where it's free to experiment. So we thought we'd have a look and see what happened when consumers could choose anything. I think this is my last chart. It's probably the most complex bit. Essentially, let's start with the red line. The red line is an 80-20 rule. It looks at what demand would look like if you were in the old world as it was described. And essentially, I've drawn a line here at 95% to just draw attention to what proportion of demand, so demand being your left-hand axis, was accounted for by how many tracks. And what you see, essentially, is that the bottom 95% of tracks, so everything but the head, should account for about 70% of revenue, or of listens in this case, in theory. With Spotify, with whom I'm sure you're all familiar, and with We7, I would expect you're familiar with too. They're both streaming services, both have got free options and paid options. You will see that actually, even when it is free to experiment, it's free to try anything you want, the bottom 95% of tracks accounted for only 20% of listens. Turn it on its head, the top 5% of tracks account for 80% of listens. With We7, it's more acute still, with that bottom 95% generating only 10% of listens. Or to turn it on its head again, the top 5% of stock generates 90% of listens. Which is to say, actually, when people are given a blank bit of paper, I say, what do you want? Everyone seems to like the same things. So I wasn't necessarily judging radio earlier, just make sure. So that's a few thoughts on the long tail. Now what about charts? I'm sorry for putting a picture of Donald Rumsfeld up there, but it's a good quote. Oh, Dick Cheney, there we go. My bad. Economic indicators can't be trusted because they don't include the money people make by selling stuff on eBay. Now, that could be a politician dodging a question, or it could be really insightful. It could yet be both. So what is happening that is not on your radar? So in response to the high street sales falling, retail stats are down, do we need a fiscal stimulus? Do you need monetary tightening? I never know. I shouldn't have said that on camera, should I? Never know. But what you need to be aware of is what is happening off your radar. Because what if eBay is up and the high street's down, and eBay is more than compensated for the fall in the high street? Actually, you're not that badly off. The numbers just make you look like you're that badly off. And the response that you have then to that difficult situation needs to reflect the available information, not just what's in front of you. And so we talk about YouTube, we talk about stream, we talk about AOL, Napster, all sorts of places where non-chart music takes place. And to give an idea of the scale, this was a 2009 chart. You've got sales of the top 10 weekly album sales, making up one chart, top 10 weekly digital song sales, making up another chart. And this is 2009 data, so MySpace probably doesn't account for quite as many nowadays. But the top 10 MySpace song streams hit nearly 30 million. And the top 10 YouTube video streams hit more than that. So what I want to say is that there is information available out there about what is popular that isn't necessarily visible to you at the moment, that you need to go out and look for, that will help inform what's up and coming, if nothing more, but probably what's already established and what's already popular. So fountain pens. When the market changes, what do? The world is changing around us in the music industry, in the radio industry, in media generally. How do you respond when the market changes? So Parker pens we're all familiar with. Their business had always been putting ink on paper. They were a pen. What do you do with a pen? Well, I write with it. Okay, so my business is putting ink from the pen onto paper until someone invented the biro. At which point your business of putting ink on paper wasn't very cost effective anymore, because someone else can do it really, really cheap for 20p whilst you're trying to sell a decent pen for 8, 9, 10, 15, 20, 200 pounds. Parker's response, after probably some panic, was to say, well, okay, what if we weren't in the business of putting ink on paper? What if we're in the gifts business? And we'll just make really nice pens that occasionally get given as gifts, and that's how we'll sustain our business. And that's exactly how they sustain their business. By realising that the core of what they do didn't have to be what they'd always done. A quick thought on book tokens. Book tokens were an idea for a long while before they became popular. During the Great Depression, so what, 1930s, book tokens really picked up speed. They're actually because the nature of business, the nature of people anyway, is that if you're generally doing quite well, you don't always innovate as much as you should. It's just human nature. It's all going well, so we'll keep doing what we've always done. It keeps working. And the book token had been around and been available for a long while. At the point when no one was spending money on anything, and buying gifts, obviously, against the budget constraint becomes more difficult, book tokens actually gained a load of traction. Because I can give you a gift with which you can do what you want, so I haven't wasted anything, and you can choose, so you're benefiting from something. And it really invigorated the book industry. So my point here is just to link into alternative strategies. What else can you do that is good to do? What haven't we thought about? As we feel a squeeze here, with the economy as it is, what else can we do? What's on the cutting room floor that could be picked up again? What else is worth rediscovering, reconsidering? And it doesn't always have to be the new things. We've heard about archives. It doesn't have to be the next new thing. What have we looked at a while ago and not looked at recently? Might it be valuable now? The other thing to say, coming back to live music. Radio is about managing large crowds. You've got large crowds. Live music isn't that dissimilar in that you're managing a large crowd. You can make good margin in live music. You can have a special event, which is scarce. In a world where everything can be recorded and listened to again, scarcity and appointment value is really important. And one of the key advantages live music has had over recorded music in past years is that you need a ticket to get in, because there's a big guy saying, you're not on the list, not getting in, or something similar. And if you can't get in, you can't enjoy the show. But the more important bit is that it is timely, and if you miss it, it is gone. That if you didn't see Bon Jovi at the O2, you missed him, it's gone. And that appointment value, in a world where people think they can have everything they want all the time, is really valuable, that scarcity that exists there. And as I've said before, with live events, you can leverage music fandom once you've got people inside your venue. You can sell them other things. And my point very simply is this. Sean Moriarty, former CEO of Ticketmaster, said that nearly 35% of ticket inventory goes unsold. And if you ask fans why they didn't go to shows, one of the more popular reasons is, I didn't know about it. I didn't know about it. I would have gone, but I didn't know about it. So I'm talking to an audience who've got the attention of a large number of people. I'm looking at a problem, on the other hand, that says we can't sell enough tickets. I'm sure there can be something done together there to benefit from the audience you've got access to, the reach that you have. I mean, there are live events happening already. I think there's scope for more from the radio industry to actually step into that space, to partner with people, and to really capitalise on what is a growing industry. And the opportunity presented really by where you are and the credibility that you have. And radio is one of the most trusted sources for recommendation. I think 33%, sorry, we did some research recently, 2,700 UK consumers, NatRep. 33% of people say that a radio DJ is one of the most trusted sources of recommendations, which is really important. It's a really influential point, a really influential place you have. And it could be a great help to other parts of the industry in progressing their business and growing your business at the same time. Thank you.